Alrighty guys, so I'm sure if any of you follow my Instagram, you may have seen a post about how I was talking about the ingress from Libra to Scorpio with the Black Moon Lilith. So the Black Moon Lilith, just to sum up, is the shadow side of our moon in ancient and different older astrological schematics. The Black Moon Lilith is essentially the dark side of the moon, and the moon is initially associated with sin. So all of the potential worst characteristics, personality quirks, or habitual behavior, or destructive behavior, even toxic things that are within us, are projected out through our Lilith or our anima archetype, if you're familiar with Carl Jung's anima projection. So I was originally going to go and cover, through each sign, but since I'm going to be doing this as a podcast thing, and I'm just going to collaborate it all together into one session, I'm just going to go over what she would be doing if she's in each house. So for Lilith being in Scorpio, it has its own specific archetypes. So in Scorpio, she manifests as self-destructive, manic-depressive, any kind of self-sabotage. She's essentially is like engulfing you with like a toxic aura. She will likely, due to emotions being closely linked with physical health and immune systems, she could possibly make you sick, especially if you're heavily influenced with water element in your chart. She can also, although it is more of a Piscean sort of Neptunian thing with schizophrenia, she can start planting negative ideas into your head, which would manifest as either homicidal urges or suicidal ideation. That's not always the case, but depending on your own emotional balance naturally, and or what's going on with the transit aspects compared to your natal chart, if you tend to be a manic depressive yourself, or tend to be like emotionally unstable for the most part, hence if you were a significant amount of fire or water and not so much air, or which would be thinking it out, or earth, which would be giving you stability, then you could go either way with one of those things. Also, the self-destructive kind of behavior could also manifest like that. The fact that Scorpio is associated with infection, it's also associated with addiction. So Neptune and Pisces archetype is associated with drugs in general, but the actual obsessive kind of tendencies is associated with Scorpio. So addiction or death by addiction specifically could potentially be an issue, especially if you're going through a crucial point in your life where one of the generational planets, for example like Saturn or Uranus, is having some sort of hard aspect to this. So, and also keep in mind too that Uranus is, although it's not in exact degree, it is within orb of Lilith, and it's opposition now. So that's actually what's been causing people to likely have some crazy dreams, and also probably why all the psychics and tarot readers are saying that the spirits are telling them that there's a bad omen coming and, Armageddon and all that. And it's like, yes, so glad you jumped on the same page with us astrologers now that actually can read things. Okay, so, told me to put that in there. Come on, Mercury's gone stationary now. I shouldn't have that kind of thing. But anyway, so that is essentially what Lilith and Scorpio does. I mean, in a way, she kind of projects that anything possibly negative in every construct, but it just all depends. For example, when Lilith was in Libra, we've had a lot of political manipulation and laws that have been violated, rights that have been infringed upon. And since Libra in the 7th house is associated with justice and law, that would be how that would have translated. Also to do with your abusing relations with other people and your social status in a way. So then when we look at Scorpio with Lilith, and then we go to look into the 1st house, what that would signify is somebody who is self-sabotaging, somebody who either, depending, like I said, with other aspects going on, if it were somebody that has a significant fire archetype, they could likely start to become almost psychopathic, aggressive, or instantly fly off the handle, that sort of thing. Or they could start to essentially embody the concept of wrath, which is one of the 7 deadly sins that was associated with Mars in my diagram that I have here. So that would basically manifest in that way. So then we look at Lilith in the 2nd house, and how would that possibly manifest? It could be bankruptcy. It could be financial ruin. It could be loss of material wealth or stability. Could be loss of personal resources. Could be somebody losing their values. Could be somebody throwing away or losing like their relationships that they have with people that are part of their foundation, like best friends, spouse, that sort of thing. It could be just losing touch with people in general and cutting yourself off and becoming more of a schizotypal archetype. And I would assume that would manifest because of either, again, the manic depressive, suicidal, or homicidal. I wouldn't say homicidal, but suicidal ideation, depression, or just her wanting to make you feel like you need to cut yourself off. A sense of hopelessness as well, because obviously with the Uranus-Pluto square, we're purging and having to get rid of old to bring the new. And a lot of us, obviously, especially anybody who has a significant Earth aspect in their chart, or is an Earth sign per se, has a significant or chronic attachment to all their material perspective and their material property. So letting go of things per se, like resources or any other sort of things that, for example, Neptune square Saturn is making us get rid of, and or Uranus square Pluto is making us get rid of, we have to deal with that. Also because of some people, depending on certain aspects within your own chart, this opposition with Neptune and Jupiter has put a lot of things in perspective for people. As for example, if you were looking from a Virgo perspective, then they would be more like day-to-day routine, being stuck into a kind of ritual, and they would care about where all their physical things are. If there was some sort of enlightenment phenomenon or experience that someone may have recently had, since Neptune and Pisces would likely trigger or potentially set off something of that sort, if that's the kind of archetype you have in your birth chart. Specifically, I guess this would apply to people too who either had Neptune or Pluto go directly over their natal Pluto, or it wouldn't be Neptune, but Pluto, or any kind of transformation of that sort. And because of Uranus' stressful aspects, there might have been some sort of enlightenment thing. So if you just came to an epiphany or just found some religious dogma and it just came to you, or you're just now getting into more spiritual concepts and now you just have gone full Buddhist and just to, cut to the chase, I guess, and get my point across, and now you don't even care about anything material-wise, then this might be you going completely overboard with that and purging everything, and or her sabotaging everything in some way, shape, or form. Then we move on to the 3rd house, and this one I definitely can say that I know this very thoroughly, because this is my natal chart placement, although it's not the same archetype. So, again, the first thing that happens with me personally is she sabotages everything I want to do communication-wise, specifically with electronics as well. In fact, this BlackBerry that I just got 5-6 days ago, brand new, haven't dropped it, barely used it, and within 24 hours of buying it, it started glitching. Granted, most people would probably go, well, you bought it during a Mercury retrograde. And yes, I actually did do that on purpose, because I have certain patterns in my chart that make me almost the polar opposite of the standard. So I always have bad luck with electronics no matter what I do. In fact, I have a tablet, my old phone, and this phone with me right now, just so I could potentially check my Facebook or use YouTube, because every single time one of them is bound to start glitching or just turn itself off and refuse to work. And you would think that there's something wrong with the battery pack, but no. If I just put it down, put it away like in a drawer and don't touch it, then somehow, some way, I go check it in a week, a month, whatever, and it works just fine. So she just, and I think it's because my Lilith is in Leo that it's a control factor. It's when she feels like making things work, that's when it works. So it's more of a, okay, well, I'm willing to go along with this, so I'll do it. So in comparison to Leo Lilith as opposed to Scorpio Lilith, is that she would just intentionally cause really, really bad, what's the word? I don't want to say infection, but I mean, like, you'd likely get viruses in your electronics. It would be something really substantial and chronic that probably wouldn't be something that you could just put the device down and come back and it would be fine. She's probably going to destroy some things like that. It may also warp your speech. You may seem to come off as more of a Scorpio Mercury, like myself, actually, with her there, because she will be whispering in your ear all kinds of things. And when I say whispering in your ear, I mean when you think and you start to have like that thought in your head or that thought process, which usually is your moon and your Mercury kind of arguing with each other in a way. She's that devil on your shoulder, except for she's not just trying to entice you or encourage you to do something. She's actually trying to gaslight you in a way, and yes, that is a term for people who have psychopathy and how they relate or how they have relations with other people. So if you're not familiar with that term, just look it up and you'll see what I'm talking about. So essentially she'll be gaslighting you into your ear and influencing you and manipulating you into thinking certain things. That could also essentially manifest into and drive you into a depression or give you kind of suicidal ideation. I would imagine that this is one of the houses, if Scorpio Lilith was in there, that this could be one of those people that randomly end up committing suicide out of nowhere with no signs or symptoms or previous warnings that anybody could see, because she just comes instantaneously. And that's also why a lot of people actually do end up committing suicide like that. They saw no signs, because the moon actually changes signs every 2.3 to 5 days. I don't mean 3 to 5 days, but 2.5 days. And so because it's rapid fire like that, and it goes through every sign throughout the zodiac in 1 month, everybody's moods are always changing. Even if you kept a mood journal, not actually try to articulate why you're upset, but just kind of put why you're upset. Or in fact, I use Facebook or social media as a gauge for that, because even if you put feeling and you pick a feeling every couple days on there when you post something, and it's not as a reactionary response to some event or some experience that you just had, but you just have a moment to reflect and you just think what kind of mood am I in? And you put that, you will start to notice that there is some sort of correlating thing with your mood, especially unless you have some sort of aspect pattern like I do, where you're the polarity, which that means that when everybody's supposed to be super emotional and water signs for the moon, I'm completely closed off and unwilling to be sympathetic or anything, that sort of thing. So knowing your own chart definitely is a lot easier for you to be able to compare and contrast, because you need that variable and that constant to be able to test the archetypal speculations or theories with that. Okay, and then we move on to the 4th house. So that's pretty self-explanatory. She's going to be sabotaging you somehow in your private life or in your home. So it would likely be some sort of toxic interaction or relationship with people in your home. It could directly actually attribute to the stability or the foundation of your physical home. It could have something to do with an abusive relationship with a mother figure. It could have something to do with, potentially, because Scorpio is ruled by the 8th house of diseases, transition, and, in my opinion, kind of co-rules death. she could essentially be there to signify that you're going to perhaps lose a mother figure, and or have some sort of death that is directly associated with the mother figure. That could also manifest as like miscarriages as well. So if for whatever reason you happen to get pregnant or you are pregnant throughout this time period, you need to make sure that you check with your OBGYN, your doctor, and keep up and make sure that you just do any extra checkups that you may possibly need, and if anything feels weird, immediately get that looked at. So, and then we look at the 5th house. The 5th house, again, would likely cause like a depression, an indifference, or an indifference with your hobbies or your interests. It would likely make you feel like you have no passion, nothing that you really want to do is worth it. Or you might just all of a sudden feel like this hobby's, worthless, useless, or why do I even do this, and that sort of thing. And again, this would be one of these specific houses that I would feel concerned, depending on how drastic it is and with other aspects that might be aspecting it, or in other planet placements, where suicide could be a problem. So essentially, like I said before, the 3rd house and then the 5th house now. Suicide can be an issue. And then we go into the 6th house. 6th house has to do with day-to-day. Also has to do with health, work, and service. Your career could just completely go flat, meaning that you could be fired, you could be laid off, your employer could go out of business, specifically because there's the whole economic instability still going on. You could start to detest or loathe your actual career or occupation. You could have some person sabotaging you or trying to destroy your actual job, either directly or indirectly by management or whoever else. Secrets might also come out in your place of employment that could potentially play into this. You could get some sort of infection. This could also manifest technically, because the polarity is the 12th house, into some sort of mental disorder. Specifically, it would be like paranoid or anxiety. And let me think. And it's just going to be your day-to-day thing. This might be somebody who has chronic, you don't get out of bed, you sleep 14 hours a day, depression for the next year. And my suggestion for you is to take some melatonin, eat some cashews, and try to incorporate as many emotional or mood boosting things into your diet that are as natural as you can go. And I highly suggest that you do it through supplements, because with a lot of the recalls with Neptune square Saturn, you never know unless you actually, which I try to, but I just haven't had the energy or the desire to do so. Check all the recalls and check certain sites or whatever for recalled food or produce before you buy. The only reason why I have issues continuously keeping up with that, besides the fact that I'm not very consistent, is that there seems to be no app and or no thorough source, website, anything like that, widget that is available for me to make sure that I can cover every possible food source to make sure that there's no recalls because of any kind of poison or, like listerias right now is a huge thing with frozen produce and E. coli and all that other stuff. So my suggestion is valerian root will help you have restful sleep, and then St. John's wort, and let's see. Sorry, I'm looking at my jars here. Just want to have one more. And let me look back here real quick. Could have sworn I had another Lavender definitely relaxes you also. But yeah, definitely St. John's Wort for sure. And what else? What house was it? So it's the Virgo house too. So I mean, you can always incorporate some chamomile and dandelion into that too, because since it's going to be in the 6th house, that could also affect your indigestion, especially depression or any kind of negative feelings, because that again directly correlates to your physical health. So then we go into the 7th house here. 7th house. So she will be sabotaging your connections with other people, your relationships. She might even be deteriorating or sabotage, like actually destroying law, which I find very fascinating actually because of what's going on currently, not just in the United States, but on a global scale, that there's just a lot of violations with laws going on because of obviously Lilith and Libra. So now instead of there just continuing to be violations, they're just going to be completely scratched from the record and they're going to change them. Or they're just going to, force their way somehow, sabotage it and destroy it. It could also be directly associated with just actually killing people off, because remember that homicidal ideation? This would likely manifest in this concept right here. Because since the 7th house is technically ruled by an air signs tend to be more on the antisocial side, and I mean that from a diagnostic statistical manual reference, meaning that psychopathy or a lack of empathy would be a thing. So then we go, I think that's about it for that. And then we can go into the 8th house. So the 8th house is where Scorpio rules. So it's kind of like the same double whammy with Neptune being in Pisces. It's just the same manifestation, just a lot more intense. And I mean, we don't even need to add the word intense to Scorpio, because I think we could kind of do without that, in my opinion. So this could have to do with some sort of infection. So since influenza and pneumonia have been a huge thing, and also because we are taking a lot of refugees that in the affirmation and through historical experiences, they are directly responsible for the plague. In fact, there have now been, I believe they say 1 in every 5 Muslim refugees that are in Minnesota or Michigan, I can't remember which state it is, are testing positive for tuberculosis. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. And also, one other thing I've noticed with the refugees that are being taken in to the United States, the majority of them seem to be coming from Northern Africa. So as though you see the Arab nationalities that are going over into Europe and elsewhere, a lot of the majority that have been coming into the United States happen to be black. And consequently enough, if you happen to follow any of my other projects that I do, my migrant pandemic page covers, and the Wenatchee Jihad Coalition covers, all of the refugee centers that I thoroughly researched. And they happen to be in low-income ghetto, quote-unquote, and I'm not saying ghetto like in a slang term, I'm talking about like the actual ghettos, of metropolitan areas throughout the United States, where it's completely run down and has a tendency to have high volumes of crime. Also, they tend to be in black neighborhoods, or African American neighborhoods. Not like I care to be PC, but, just make sure that you don't think I'm talking about something else. So, we have, the disease factor and pandemics, essentially, happening with that. Also, it has to do with others' resources. So, specifically because Lilith and Libra just was essentially violating all kinds of laws, this, instead of looking at it as a completely different phenomenon, this, when Lilith is in the Black Moon, Lilith is in Scorpio, going into the 8th house, this could actually manifest as a cause and effect. So, the cause, the actual action was laws being violated. The cause is a loss of collective resources because of it. So that's pretty much self-explanatory. Then we go into the 9th house, which is your house of travel, foreign affairs, and knowledge, and religion. So this would, because Saturn is in Sagittarius, and I would assume when Saturn actually goes direct, is going to be when this is going to be intense. And I think it goes direct right around the time frame that Mars does, and Mars is pretty much going to be conjunct with Saturn, which is going to intensify the Sagittarius overzealous, aggressive, assertive, fiery thing. So I would assume with that Lilith will be manifesting in a homicidal way. And actually, now that I think about that, that's interesting, because the first house, that's also fire house, essentially, I said homicidal as well, so I'm starting to see a pattern here. So, homicidal, meaning since it's there's Saturn and Sagittarius associated with that, and actually Saturn is supposed to be, at least from an astrotheological perspective, associated with Lilith, because Saturn was essentially Satan back then, symbology-wise, and the moon was supposed to be the sin. So through Satan in the 10th house, you will project Satan through sinning, and the dark side of the moon, which is essentially your source of sin, is Black Moon Lilith. So yeah, that, and Saturn being in Sagittarius, which is the sign of religion, there would likely be deaths directly attributed to people claiming it's for God or religion. Which I'm not even going to try to pretend that I'm being vague about that, because I already know about that, and I already see it happening. That means that with that kind of manifestation, that it's going to be more of a frequent thing, meaning there's going to be a lot more deaths happening. And also that would actually validate my theory, as well as Baba Vanga's prediction, for there being the Great Muslim War in 2016. Which, essentially, Nostradamus' quatrain hints that it would be in Europe. Because that's when he was talking about the flood. And a lot of people actually think that it's going to be a real flood. But funny enough, if you actually read a lot of the underground news, especially like Bare Naked Islam and Say No to Refugees, like all those jihad, the Jihad Coalition, Counter Jihad Coalition, the Glasgow Gang, Front Page Magazine, Act for America, and all kinds of stuff. Like there's all kinds of things. If you just find wherever they're linking some of the imams, either discussions, lectures, or for God's sake, blogs. There's a bunch of Muslims out there that just post blogs all day long just to tell people about themselves. And they use the metaphor for flooding with their migration thing more frequently than I fucking like to even think is a pun or accident. So, but we all know that Muslims don't like astrology, and they wiped that shit out a long time ago. So then we go ahead and move on to the 10th house. 10th house would be, she'd like to sabotage your career. You could have, you could experience death or loss at work. So, I mean, you could, also lose your job too. Kind of like the 6th house. You could potentially lose, or like, your reputation can be destroyed. You could develop the archetype of Scorpio in Black Moon Lilith as your reputation. I could see that totally happening for the Pope, maybe. And maybe Obama, actually, now that I think about it. But, I'm not going to throw my bias stuff in there anymore. But, besides that, and also, governments and government bodies being the direct source of massive amounts of poisoning or deaths. Yeah. Also, just complete annihilation and destruction of foundations as well as government bodies or sociological institutions. And then we go into the 11th house, and speaking of sociological institutions, that theme bleeds over. God, see, that's a horrible pun. God damn it. Bleeds over, whatever, I'm going to go with it. Bleeds over into the 11th house. So that could be destroying friendship ties, social networking. Could also be slandering or causing some sort of toxic reputation kind of damage because of social networking avenues or facets. So people being slandered via social media. It would totally make sense if like people like Trump or whoever else tried to now go and sue for slander or libel, and for some reason the mob rule or the majority decided that he's not worthy of retribution. It could also be because Scorpio itself, the archetype, is known for holding grudges and being vengeful. So that sort of thing, a toxic atmosphere on a sociological or cultural level, which I'm not even going to pretend like I'm being vague about that, because I'm just kind of brainstorming out loud and I realize what's coming out of my mouth and I'm just like, wow, yeah, exactly. That there would be some sort of toxic relations or toxic interaction on a cultural or like a national level or even on a global level with all different kinds of sociological institutions and or groups, organizations. Just the more I talk, the more I need to laugh. Yeah. I pretty much that's all I can say. And then also, since the 11th house is supposed to represent things that are out of your control. Pandemics are out of your control. Scorpio is associated with the 8th house of disease and infection. So it totally makes sense, actually. If that quote-unquote pandemic... Oh, well, I mean, it's already starting. But there's so many people that have been dying this year, and everybody's so heartbroken about it because they say, why are so many people dying? Newsflash, everybody that is one of those people that may have said that. There's been a lot of people dying for quite some time now. And there's actually, a birth and death simulator that you can see online. I don't remember the actual link to it, but where you can simultaneously watch where everybody's being born and who dies everywhere in the world. And, I saw that quite a few years ago. It was very interesting. So there's a lot of people on this planet, and therefore equal amount of deaths. But, the Muslims have definitely jumped up on that and helped increase that number substantially. So, but while increasing that number substantially consciously by killing infidels or whoever else opposes them or insults Islam, they're going to be killing another good half of us because of influenza, the plague, that sort of thing. So, and also, in fact, in 1918, there was a huge influenza outbreak that killed a good amount of Europe, part of the United States. So, 1918, give or take, obviously we're in 2016, it could be happening any time now. I know that we will eventually have some sort of epidemic, but it could start now, and it might just be slowly getting started. So, it definitely... I think the one that'll slowly start to creep up on everybody will be cancer. And that would be why Nostradamus said that man needs to find a cure for cancer, and he actually does. Because since secret's out, of course, for anybody who doesn't happen to know this, there's been cures for cancer for quite some time, but the medical industry does not want to release that because they make profit off people with cancer. Well, they'll have to come to a point where everybody has cancer, and if all of their patients are dead, they can't make money off of them. So, at some point or another, they're going to have to mainstream the cancer cure, and everybody's going to need it. And other than that... Oh yeah, speaking of which, resources. So the 8th house too, by the way, on, I guess, a more of a mundane level, but this affects all of us. It's not just, a select few. Because of the Uranus-Pluto square causing earthquakes and trauma and causing foundations to be crumbled, and the Fukushima plants in Japan to be completely destroyed, and because they have either dropped the ball and not told anybody or could not do anything about it to stop the leaking, there has been 300 million gallons, not million, I'm making that number up, 300 something, I know it's a giant number, of certain amounts of nuclear or radiant contaminants being poured in the ocean. That's why we've been having issues with the sea life off the Pacific Ocean. And why all scientists and environmentalists on the West Coast have been tracking the high amounts of cesium-137. It's essentially radiation. That everybody's going to start developing cancer. So your water's poisoned, essentially, which causes disease. So that could be disease in fish, which is, again, one of the quatrains that I think Nostradamus had mentioned that is either going to come true this year or next year, or at the latest, the following year. But I'm going to get super sidetracked. So the 12th house, the final one. So with Scorpio being in that house with Lilith, obviously the fact that it's, associated with the moon means that there would likely be emotional imbalances. I've already mentioned that. And because that has to do with your subconscious and your dreams, you'd likely have nightmares. You likely, if suicide obviously would be something very, very, like if I was going to say, out of all the ones that I said that suicide would be associated with, which one would be the most likely or the highest probability of actually committing or going through with a suicide attempt would be if Lilith's in your 12th house. So that would be people who have Sagittarius rising. Or Sagittarius in general. And actually, the more I think about that too, I don't know. I kind of know how, but I'm not going to, go ahead and elaborate on it to kill more time. But for some reason, a lot of young people going through their Saturn return right now that happen to be of Muslim origin, religious-wise, would likely be sacrificing themselves for the Caliphate Jihad this upcoming year. Which, oh wow, see? And that's one of those things I just said out loud. So, there's all those jokes about, where are all the women and children for the refugees? Oh, okay. Ha ha ha. Yep, okay, so that just validates some things like the Great Muslim War going to happen and the war happening this year. Yeah, okay. Makes sense. So, because they say that a lot of the refugees are in their early 20s, and if a lot of them are closer to their Saturn return time, then that means that they fully intended to come and invade and intend to go out. Oh my god, I was going to say with a bang. Oh my god, the puns are so inappropriate. It's my Scorpio Mercury, I'm sorry. But maybe I shouldn't be sorry, because if anybody's even Googled the word Plutonian definition, they would know that comes from the Scorpio archetype. So it's pretty much instead of me just calling this some sort of brand or sub-faction of astrological theory, it's kind of like a self-imposed warning label. The puns are always going to be really morbid. But yeah, so it could, like I said, it could be sacrificing yourself, suicide. It could be dying of drug overdose or drug addiction. Yeah, this is just it. Oh, you could also die in a hospital. You could die because of medication. Not like you intended to, but medication. Or, this is a horrible, horrible place for anybody who might be potential, power or influence to be pissing people off. Because having Lilith and Scorpio in your 12th house could mean that you're assassinated. Luckily for Trump, he's got a Leo rising, so we're good. But yeah, so let's look through all the houses and just apply that to whichever you want. So again, if you're going to go off your sun sign, then look at the house that essentially Lilith falls in. So if you were an Aries sun, then you would obviously be looking at the 8th house. And use those themes that I talked about to kind of just give a vague generalization of the entire year. And if you want more of a day-by-day or immediate overwhelming theme kind of date, on a everyday level, then look at your ascendant one. And also, it doesn't hurt to look and see in your own chart, if you have done your own chart, see if Lilith is actually transiting over any planets in your personal chart, because that is also a huge factor that plays into this. In fact, that could actually be depending on what planet it goes over, if it's one of the personal planets, anything that, is Mars or in, which is obviously the Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury, and Mars, then she could actually, when she transits over, by the exact degree, that could actually be an exact trigger time frame for some major event that would be attributed or associated with some of the themes that I mentioned. So, and if you don't know what the hell your chart looks like, and you've never had a reading before, or you don't understand that gibberish that astro.com tries to show you, you can always contact me. Go to theapplevalley.astrologer.com. You can contact me by email, which is rayreinhartz@gmail.com. Also, facebook.com/rayreinhartzastrologer. You can even find my personal Facebook. It's not that hard to find. And I don't mind. You can go ahead and just add me. Permission to talk about astrology all day. And, other than that, I can do reports, or I can do consultations via Skype, in person, on the phone. Whichever you want to do. I can even do it live on here, I guess, now, too. I might be doing that in the future, out for discounts, or do some actual contests to give free readings away. So keep your eyes out for that. And I won't make it easy either, because I want to see if people are actually even listening to anything. And I'll be just randomly dropping the details in somewhere. And that means that I know that whoever does try to sign up for the contest and follows the rules is a dedicated listener, because goddamn I talk a lot. So, alright, that'll be it, guys. And if you have any further questions about Lilith, feel free to send me a question either on Twitter, which my Twitter handle is at Ray Reinhardt's. And also, I believe all of this is linked to my actual podcast profile. So it's the Spreakers, I always want to say speaker, Spreakers.com/user/Pluto astrology. Plutonian astrology. There you go. Alright.